Hello everyone, my name is Alexis Flores and I am a technical marketing engineer here at Cisco. And in today's video, we're going to be going over how to configure and deploy URL filtering on the Cisco Catalyst 8000V. Let's go ahead and dive right in. First, let's start with a quick look at our agenda for this video. I will start by going over a quick overview of what is URL filtering and some of the use cases where we can leverage URL filtering to enhance security policies for an enterprise network while still providing quality user experience. Then we'll go over the configuration and options required to deploy URL filtering and end it with a quick demonstration with how it works in real time. So for those of you who may not be familiar with URL filtering is an on-premise content filtering solution that is available on the Cisco Catalyst 8000V, CSR 1000V, and ISRV, virtual routers running iOS XE in autonomous mode. The URL filtering feature comes with the Unified Threat Defense Engine, or UTD engine for short, which is a container-based security application that can be downloaded officially from Cisco and installed on your virtual router. The available control plane cores and memory can be leveraged by the UTD engine application to run Snort IPS, URL filtering, or both, depending on the type of security policies you want to apply to your network. Running both Snort IPS and URL filtering UTD applications will enhance the controlled access to the internet. So what are the benefits for URL filtering? The web filtering feature allows a user to have controlled access to the internet and by configuring domain and URL-based policies and filters. It helps to secure the network by blocking malicious or unwanted websites. Web filtering comprises of URL-based filtering and domain-based filtering. Domain-based filtering helps control access to websites and servers at the domain level, and URL-based filtering helps control access to websites at the URL level. You can use web filtering to blacklist individual URL or domain names and configure whitelisting policies for the same. You can also provision to allow or block a URL based on a known reputation or category. To use the web filtering feature will not require additional memory if you already have Snort IPS deployed, as long as you have your container deployed with the right resource profile. There is a minimum requirement of 8 GB of memory on the platform in order to use the UTD engine URL filtering feature. A common use case for URL filtering is employee internet access. In this example, let's say that we have an enterprise branch location with direct internet access. Without proper security policies, the branch may be at risk of cybersecurity threats when employees or guests navigate to unknown malicious websites that can cause harm. We can deploy URL filtering on our virtual branch router such as the Catalyst 8000V to inspect outgoing traffic for any URLs or domains known as potential risks. The packet in question will be punted from the router data plane to the UTD engine container and checked against the whitelist or blacklist if configured, and if the packet does not fall into either two lists, then it will be subject to our URL database lookup. The packet will be looked up on our local URL database to see if it's registered as a threat, and if it is, it will be dropped immediately. And if it's not seen as a risk or marked as a trustworthy URL, it will go ahead and let the packet pass through and allow destination traffic to come back. One quick note, if the URL is not registered or is not known in the local URL database, then the URL filtering feature can also look up the URL to a cloud-based web filter through Webroot. So now let's go over the actual configuration of URL filtering on our Catalyst 8000V. This can be done in 8 simple steps. The first step is we're going to go ahead and enable application hosting, and we can do that by using the command iox. And after we download our UTD package and we copy it to our boot flash on our router, we can go ahead and install the package using app hosting, install app ID, and then the name of the app, package, boot flash, and the name of the file we downloaded. And then for step 2, after we have installed our UTD engine package, we go ahead and configure our virtual port groups. And virtual port groups are used so that the router's data plane can punt packets to the container. It's pretty much a communication link between the container and the router itself. After we go ahead and configure our port groups, we're going to have 2 port groups. One for our management interface so we can manage our container, and the second one is our data interface or our data plane interface so that the container can punt packets back and forth between the router data plane and the container. And after we set our virtual port groups, we're going to go ahead and activate the virtual servers. So we're going to go ahead and activate the container, and then we can provide a app resource package profile. And this can determine how big we want our container to be. And there's 3 different sizes. There's URL low, medium, and high. And medium and high will require an additional 4 gigabytes on top of the 8 already required for our container. So URL filtering low profile will require 8 gigs of memory, while medium and high will require 12 gigs minimum for optimal performance. And in step 4, we can configure whitelist and blacklist. This is optional, but you can use these to bypass our URL lookup. So we can have websites here that we want to block or whitelist depending on our need. This is an optional step, but it's always nice to have just in case there's sites that you don't want to waste processing cycles to look up when you already know they're good or bad. And after configuring our whitelist and blacklist, we can go ahead and configure the UTD configuration policy for our container. And we can use UTD web filter URL profile. We give it a profile name, and then, like I said, you can also block websites or domains based on categories. In this example, we are going to go ahead and block categories such as alcohol and tobacco, fashion and beauty, and financial services as an example. And we want us to get alerted whenever one of these URLs are under one of these categories. And we can also block based on reputation. So the UTD URL filtering feature uses web roots to identify the reputation score of a website. And these scores are all dependent on different sources such as how long it's been established, is it known as a threat, who hosts this website. So all these factors contribute to the reputation score from 0 to 100, 0 being very malicious and 100 being trustworthy. And here we're saying block any websites that are moderate risk, which can be anywhere from reputation score of 0 to 60. And then with URL filtering, it allows us to add this feature where if the container is not working for any reason or it has failed, we can automatically close the data plane so that no traffic goes through the container when it's not working. So that way, if its container is not working, we can just shut off all network traffic, so that way we keep our network safe until the container becomes healthy again. So for our next steps, we can go ahead and attach our blacklist and whitelist to our URL filtering policy. And once we do that, we can also go ahead and configure a block server profile whenever we want to block any websites and send the user to either a blocked HTML page or to a block server. All we have to do is specify what interface we want to host our block page. We can go ahead and provide either a file or do an inline text. And then we can also specify what ports we want this block page to show up on. And in this one, I'm showing that I want to display this on port 80 and 443. And then we can go ahead and attach this block policy to our URL filtering policy. And once we do that, we can go ahead and configure the data plane policy. And all we have to do is go into the UTD engine standard configuration. And then we specify the profile that we want our UTD web filter engine to use. And then last but not least, we can go ahead and enable UTD on either all interfaces, which I'm saying here with all interfaces, or we can specify individual interfaces depending on our network configuration that we want to have. In this example, I want to deploy UTD web filtering on all my interfaces and use the UTD engine standard policy that I've attached here. And that is it. And that's really all the configurations that we will need. Of course, if you want to look at more additional configurations, you could look at our configuration guides, but these steps that we just went through are all you need to get UTD engine web filtering up and running. Some things that you should know before deploying is that this demo that I will show you will be going over URL filtering in autonomous mode, which means not in SD-WAN mode. I will be making a future video for URL filtering in SD-WAN mode and some other time. In order to use the UTD engine web filtering feature, the UTD engine itself must be downloaded, copied, and installed on the virtual router flash before configuring. And the UTD engine must be running the same image version as the virtual router or the installation process will fail. So this means that if you're running 8000V on iOS XE 17.7, then you will need to download and install and copy the UTD engine for iOS XE 17.7 as well. And this applies to every version as well. As mentioned earlier, you will need an additional 4 to 8 gigs of memory based on the URL filtering size profile. So as mentioned before, URL low requires an additional 4, whereas medium and high will require an additional 8, for a total minimum of 12 gigs of memory for the higher end profiles. So for the demonstration, we're going to go over 5 different steps. First, we're going to go ahead and show how to download and install the UTD engine on the Catalyst 8000V. After we install the application container, then we can go ahead and activate the container and give it the proper resource allocation. After we do that, we'll configure the web filtering profile. And then after we configure and apply the data plane policy, we'll go ahead and verify the configuration. And then we'll set up a host and we will try to access websites on our block list or on our block categories to show that UTD engine is working properly. And that should wrap up our demo for today. So first thing I'm going to do is navigate over to software.cisco.com. This is where I can find my repository of Cisco software. So everything that I need will be coming from this website. And first thing I'm going to go is to go down to the download and upgrade section and then click on access downloads. And so since we can use the URL filtering feature on the C8000V, CSR1000V, and ISRV, for this demo, I'll be showing you how to download and install on a Catalyst 8000V Edge software. So if I want to go ahead and search for the product here, or if you already have done it previously, you'll find it on your previous download section. Since I already have it here, I'll go ahead and go and click on one of the links to the C8000V. And you want to make sure that the iOS XE version is the same as the UTD engine you're going to install, or else it's going to fail. In this example, I'll be using 17.10, and I want to make sure that my UTD engine is also 17.10. So if we go back here to one folder to the 8000V, here you can find the UTD Snort IPS engine software. This is where we can find the UTD engine package that we need to install on our C8000V. So I'll click there. And as mentioned, we do want to make sure we have the same version. So here, this UTD engine is for iOS XE version 17.10. So now that I know that this is the one, I'll go ahead and download this file and then upload it to my C8000V. I already have done this step to save some time, so let's go ahead and move to the terminal to verify that it's there. So moving over to our terminal, I've logged into my C8000V, and just to show you that I have already downloaded and uploaded the UTD package, I'll show you here with show directory. And as you can see here, I have already uploaded the UTD engine file to my C8000V boot flash. And also another way that we can check that we have the right version is by using the command here, show UTD engine standard version. And the output of this command shows us that for our virtual service or our engine is UTD, it'll tell us which recommended version to use. And here it's saying, since we're running 17.7 as our iOS XE image, it wants us to use the 17.7 UTD engine as well. And we can verify here that the one installed is 17.7. So this also gives us some clarity and then some confirmation that we do have the right one installed for our C8000V to run properly. And now let's look at some of the configurations that we already have on our C8000V. The steps that we showed earlier, they're already installed on the C8000V. So we're not going to go and spend time going through the configuration, but actually see how it looks like once it's already installed. So if I do a show run and pipe it with the session virtual port group here, I have already declared my interfaces for my communications between my router and my container. So I have my management interface as VPG0, and then I have my data interface as VPG1. So now let's take a look at my UTD configuration. If I do a show run and capture the UTD config information, let's take a look at here at our UTD web filter configuration. So if we look at UTD web filter block server local here, this is our configuration for our block server. So as mentioned earlier, we can redirect our users to go to land on a block page saying, hey, this website is blocked, don't go to this website, or it's been blocked by the UTD engine. And then we can also, as mentioned earlier, we can set our web filter URL profile. And here, as mentioned earlier, we can set up our blacklist, our whitelist, we can set up our block local server policy, our reputation, and then after we set those configurations, we can go ahead and enable them on all the interfaces that we want to. And in the case or the situation where the UTD engine fails or is not healthy, we can have the connection closed so that way no traffic gets through while our engine is out of service or in an unhealthy state. And then we also have our app hosting configuration for our container itself, and then we have the gateway and the interfaces so that the data plane of the router can communicate with the container itself. And we can also check the engine status of our UTD container, and we can use the command show UTD engine standard status. Here it'll tell you what version it's running, what the profile is, so it could be low, medium, or high, how much memory the container is using, the one that we allocated based on the profile, so we're at 32%. Status green, which means that it's in a healthy state, meaning that there is no issues currently on the container. And you can also see the overall status of it, and you can see the current signature package. So if you enable Snort IPS on your UTD engine, which you can have Snort IPS and URL filtering combined, it will use a signature package that comes by default on the C8000V, but you can also update it and get the latest version depending on your subscription. And if there's any failures or any failure updates, it'll tell you right here when you run the command. So you know if something is going wrong with the DNS configuration or if it's having connectivity issues. But the current status is idle, meaning that there's nothing wrong with it. It's all running according and without any issues. And if we want to look at additional configurations for our UTD engine, we can run this command show UTD engine standard config. And here it can tell us all the information that is enabled and configured on our C8000V UTD engine. So here we have our virtual port group ID. We also have, as I mentioned earlier, we can also enable Snort IPS to run on the UTD engine in conjunction with the web filter. So here I do have it enabled, and I do have a separate configuration for it to make sure that it is protecting my network. But I'm going to focus on the web filtering section here. So I do have my web filtering enabled as well. I do have my blacklist and whitelist, so I'm able to go to google.com and cisco.com without having to go through the URL engine lookup. But I'm also blocking Facebook and Instagram from being part of the URL lookup, since I know for a fact that I don't want these to be accessed to by our guests or by our employees. So that'll just get blocked automatically. And then any website that gets blocked will go ahead and get forwarded to our block server, which is just a loopback interface that I set up. And as mentioned earlier too, we can set up our reputation to block any moderate risk websites, which is anything that's rated between 0 and 60. These are all rated based on what webroot assigns it. And then we can also enable alerts. We can also enable, in case that our database fails or if something's going on with the container, we can close the container so that way traffic doesn't go through the router and go out and cause any potential threat to our network. So now that we have that we went through the configuration, let's go ahead and go to a host behind this router and try to go to any of these websites on our whitelist and blacklist. And let's see what happens when we try to access them. So now I've logged into one of my hosts hiding behind my C8000V that is running the UTD engine with web filtering enabled. And first, let's try and test our whitelist and blacklist feature. First, let's go ahead and visit a whitelisted website, which in my case would be www.cisco.com. This should work without any issues since it is part of my whitelisted websites. And since it worked well, no issues there, let's go ahead and try going to one of our blacklisted websites, which would be www.facebook.com. And then this should get blocked and should redirect me to our URL engine. So here it is being blocked, and as you can see here, it should lead me to and as you can see here, the website did get blocked, and you see here that this is my loopback interface, and this is the block website or the block page that I'm hosting saying, hey, this website has been blacklisted and it's been blocked by the UTD engine, meaning that the website did get blocked by the UTD engine, and it redirected the user to the block page hosted on the C8000V virtual router. And just to verify that the router did go ahead and whitelist and blacklist these websites, I can go ahead and go back to the router, and if I run the command show UTD engine standard login events, it'll log every event where it got, when a URL got whitelisted, when it got blacklisted. So we should be able to see any log that shows going to cisco.com or a log event saying that Facebook got blocked. So if I run this command here, press enter, we should be able to see here, if you look near the bottom, that we did try to go to facebook.com, and as you can see here that the action taken was dropped. Whereas if we went to cisco.com, which we did previously, we see here that the action taken here was passed, meaning that the URL engine is working properly, the whitelist and blacklist are working properly, and then meaning that we can secure our network using URL filtering on our Catalyst 8000V. And that is it for today's video. Please feel free to look at our resources that we have online. Please check us out on Cisco Catalyst TV and subscribe to our YouTube channel. There you can find an abundance of videos that go over other configurations and other videos from our team in both wireless, switching, and routing. And also, if you like more information on how to configure URL filtering or enable additional features, please feel free to visit us on Cisco Communities, and here is a link to the URL filtering page specifically. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.